There are some very, very strict boundaries and guidelines that we need you to go by.
It's not fair!
Do everything with a good attitude.
If you don't come up now, I'm cutting your internet privileges.
Mom, jeez.
This house is not a democracy. We are in charge.
You're the worst parent ever!
Copies. Now, today is going to be a little bit different. If you don't know, for the last several weeks we've been doing a series called #WorstParentEver, and our hope has been that you will at some point in your parenting journey have that said to you. Because if you don't ever hear those words, you're the worst parent ever, or you're a mean parent, or you just, whatever, if you don't hear something similar to that, if everything you do makes your children happy, you're going to gift the world with a terrible adult. And so we've been talking the last several weeks about it. What we wanted to do today was we wanted to do a couple things. Because we know in a series we can't necessarily address every single topic about parenting. And so we had a couple topics we want to talk about today. And then we want to do some Q&A. So if you didn't have a chance, at the very back, some people have already done this, but on the very back there's a table. In fact, what I'm going to do is, fellas, I'm going to have you, if I can get you four guys, just to grab these and just pass these out. You can write your questions on the back of these, and we're going to just give you just a minute, and you can come and you can write them, and you're going to drop them up here on the stage, and we'll try to field those questions, as well as we're going to throw a number on the screen. And we can go ahead and do that now. And you can text in questions, and we'll do our best to field those questions today. Now, let me say right up front, we are all on a parenting journey. None of us purport to be experts in this area. But what we do say is that we've talked to a lot of other parents. We've read a tremendous amount of material. We live our lives saturated in this. We study God's Word to bring God's best ideas to the parenting conversation. And so what we want to do today is we want to field some questions and hopefully be a resource to you. And at the end of service, what we want to do is we have a book for every family unit in here. If you have kids, we want you to have a copy of this book. Our family pastors, Chris and Shante, will be at the back to give you this book. It's actually a really cool book because it's two books in one, all right? One of the books is called Playing for Keeps, and it's a few principles about love over time, and the other book is Losing Your Marbles, and it talks about a short story about love over time. It's just some really great principles for parents, and we want you to have this. So after church, make sure you pick up your copy. Now this morning I'm super excited because I get to sit with some really cool people. Our family pastors, Chris and Shante Kiefer, if you guys want to come on up. Chris, we forgive you for breaking the mic. And the lovely and talented Mrs. Peterson, with whom I've been trying for years to make this happen. So, babe, if you want to come on up. All right, if you guys get a chance to pass those out. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take like a couple minutes, and if you guys want to just put some music on, we're going to do that. And there's the questions. You can text questions there if you guys want to put some music on. If you do have questions, you can write them down and bring them up, and then we're going to get started fielding some questions. So give us about 2 minutes, and let's get some music going, fellas, and we're going to get into this thing. All right, I think we're ready. So let's do this. Let's just tell you a little bit about our family. So Chris and Shante, if you guys want to go first and just tell us a little bit about your family, introduce yourselves, what you do here at the church, and the story of your family, that'd be good.
You notice they gave me the ear mic now. I can't drop it. So, I'm Chris, and this doesn't want to stay, so I'm going to hold it right here like this. I'm Chris. This is Shante. We have 2 kids, Jeremiah and Sierra. And we will be married for 5 years on November 20th. And we are the family pastors here at Church 180. We've been going here for about 4 years now? Yep, 4 years. And Jeremiah and Sierra are 9 and 10. Jeremiah's a boy, Sierra's a girl.
So, Sherry and I have been married for 18 years, and we have 6 daughters, ages 12, 11, 10, 8, 5, and 4. Right? It's good. And and each of them is extremely different. So it's not like you learn how to parent once and you got it figured out. It's learning how to parent 6 times. And then what else we found is that every time they have a birthday, everything changes. So I mean, it's what 6 times. I guess just 6 times as many birthdays as they had. So like parenting is this game that's always evolving and always changing, and so we've had that experience. We talk about parenting a lot, and I think probably one of the things that we do best is we've gone to people who have kids that look like what we want our kids to look like when they're older, and we've bought them coffee, or we've pulled them to the side and asked for some time, and just said, what did you do? Like, what were the things that you would do again, and what were the things that you would do differently? We've learned so much from older parents, and I just encourage everybody to actually go ahead and embrace that as a practice. It's an incredible resource, and I just want to say right up front that if you're in this room and you don't have kids, and you're like, well, today is going to be probably pretty irrelevant to me because I'm not going to have kids, or I don't want kids, or my kids are grown. Let me just say to you right up front that that's not necessarily true, because there are lots of us on a parenting journey who need to learn from you. And I would also say to you, if you don't have kids yet, or your kids are grown, there's still an incredible way for you to get engaged in the lives of children. And quite frankly, it is incredibly important that you do, because our relationship with Evanport Elementary is significant. Our relationship with Pilgrim's Inn is significant. And if you're saying, I'm not sure where I could fit in and help with kids, there are 2 great opportunities to serve and volunteer. And then there's Family 180. There's kids over there. There's kids back here right now that need adult input. Now, I've started the practice every Monday. Last year, I realized, I schedule lunch meetings. I schedule meetings with people all the time. And I just said, this year, I'm going to schedule a lunch meeting with my daughters every week. So every Monday, I've started going to their school and having lunch with them. And what I've realized is I sit at the table with all their friends, and I see their friends, and I hear their friends. What I realize is there is a tremendous need for safe, mature adult influence in the lives of our children. There's an incredible need for that. And so if you don't have kids, it doesn't mean that you don't have a role to play. Because our schools, one of the things that Evanport has said to us as a church, they said, one of the things you can help us with the most is just volunteers to help these kids read and to be an adult influence in their lives. Because the statistics are breathtaking when it comes to children who don't have either a male role model in their life or a safe adult presence in their life. And so I just pray that our church would be one of those organizations that would actually begin to lower those statistics. All right? So there's my spiel. All right, so let's just get right into it. We'll just take some of these questions. We're getting some questions in on text, and we've got some questions on Facebook and Twitter, so that's really cool. And I'll just tell you a secret. The more questions never mind, I'll tell you when we're done. All right, so here we go. Let's start with this. What is a good way for a God-loving child to deal with bullies or unkind words at school? So what's a good way for a child who is a Christian to deal with bullies? I'm going to throw that to Shante Kiefer.
We've dealt with this in our home. What we encourage our children to do is always be the love that they want to see in their communities. And we often try to remind our children that when there is a bully or someone, whether it's someone else or to them, that it's often because that child feels a void in their own life. So we encourage our children to first try to work it out with their words, like to go to the child and maybe ask, why are you doing this? Or could you not do this? It makes me feel a certain way. And we've actually seen our children do some really cool things where they extended across that table and have given to these kids and made friends. And so we just always encourage our children to do the love first. I mean, obviously, if it escalates, then you get teacher-parent involvement. But we just try to take the focus off of the child who is being bullied and put it back on maybe that bully and say, let's try to pray for this child and figure out what void is missing in their life and try to be a positive influence in their life.
You guys remember a few years ago the story of, remember Paul Potts on Britain's Got Talent? Oh, that's a great story. I'm reading his autobiography right now, and and basically Britain's Got Talent was like America's Got Talent, and Simon Cowell everybody knows Simon Cowell, right? Like the meanest man in the world. And it was at the end of the day, and this guy came out. He looked kind of goofy. He had a suit on that didn't fit, and you could see the judges. They kind of looked at each other and just kind of rolled their eyes, like, "Oh, geez, what's this going to be?" And the guy's name was Paul Potts, and he opened his mouth, and the most beautiful voice came out. He's an opera singer, just unbelievable. If you just go on Google and Google Paul Potts, and it was amazing. And he has since gone on to be, record 3 albums that have won Grammys. He's an incredibly famous musician, tours the world, is an opera singer now. And he wrote an autobiography, and he was bullied significantly as a child. And he said one of the things, he was literally sexually abused, he was emotionally, verbally abused, he was physically abused. The stuff that he writes about was extreme bullying. And but he said one thing I found was that as a child, I found that music was a safe place for me. It was a place where I found acceptance and affirmation. And I'm reading through that, I'm like, as a parent, I think maybe one of the things we can help our children do, if they're experiencing bullying, is to help them to find an environment where they do shine. For Potts, it was a music environment. He wasn't necessarily an athlete. He wasn't he just, music was his thing, and his parents helped to guide him and direct him in that environment, and he shined, and the bullying diminished in that environment. So I think that's something else to consider.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because one of the visions of Family 180 is to see the king, and I know Chris had talked about that at one point, but it is seeing that potential that Paul talked about in your child and encouraging that potential, and also widen the circle of safe adults. Because I think when we raise the self-esteem of our children, it enables that confidence for them to go out and make a difference in their world.
It's good.
Yeah, I think also too, when in doing that, you really do, because from a child's perspective, when they're getting picked on and bullied, the focus is all on them. Like, there's something wrong with me. Obviously, what they're saying is true. There's got to be something wrong with me. I'm not cool enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not good looking enough. Just whatever the deficiency that is coming across from the bullying. But when you talk to them about that, let them know why the bully's doing that, all of a sudden it has nothing to do with me. Then it almost like relieves a lot of the pressure of, it really hasn't to do with me. It really has to do with them. And then that opens the door to all those conversations as well, too.
It's good. Here's one that says, why do I as a parent feel like nothing is ever good enough? Sounds like maybe a perfectionistic streak. Sherry, I'm going to throw this one to you. You still love me?
But I think nothing's ever good enough. I tend to have that perfectionist streak in me. I think maybe if we, I tend to, for myself, tend to want to set goals, and things can come up in the day and they don't get accomplished and you feel like a failure. But I think you have to look at the greater picture and build into yourself. I know that a lot of times when I step aside and start to build into me, maybe through reading books or listening to a podcast or going to a seminar, like any of those kind of things, when I do that, it kind of allows me to remember the big picture of things, and makes me feel good about myself when I start to build into who I am. That you don't feel like maybe you're such a failure as a parent.
I think when we first got married, Sherry was unbelievably meticulous. Everything was perfect. And then we started having kids and more kids and more kids, and we just got carried away. And it's been fun to watch Sherry evolve from a place where everything had to be absolutely perfect to a place where that's not the most important thing right now. And you still struggle a little bit sometimes with that streak, but it's been a cool.
I do, but I think when you look at your kids and you see the lights start to come on with them, the pile of laundry that's there isn't the most important thing. And I just try to I just read a piece in a book that just says we're raising our kids for the future. So don't get caught up in the now. Don't get so focused on that little thing that they did wrong and forget about, this is the child I'm going to put out into the world, and we will never remember that tiny little thing that they just did. It might need correction, but it's not the end of the world. So I'm really I just put in front of me, remember their future. Is this really going to change who they are? If it's not, then give them a consequence and move on. You know what I'm saying? And that's been good for me, because being the perfectionist that I am, sometimes I tend to say, every little thing, you're in trouble. This is the end of the world, and it really isn't. So that is a really big deal for me to remember. There's a future for them, and this little thing really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
You want to take that on, Shante?
Well, I mean, I understand that because I think as a parent, you're totally invested. The question was, why do we feel that way? You're totally invested in this child's life, and oftentimes we take that responsibility on ourselves. For me, it's been really good to have friends that'll tell me the truth, that'll look at me and say, hey, you set your standard here, and this child or this situation's being measured against this standard, and you take that child out in the world, that's a great child. It is really good to have that circle that'll just look at me and go, what you're expecting right now is unreasonable. So, I mean, that's been helpful for me, but I know that it's a very difficult thing when you're so invested in that situation and in that child.
This is one, and I believe this was written by a child, but it's worth fielding. And Mr. Kiefer will toss this one to you. Why do parents know a lot?
I don't know why we have me feel that way. I don't really know that much. I'm just a pretty face. So I know for me, and read that one more time. I want to make sure I heard that.
Why do parents know a lot?
Why do parents know a lot? Because they're older.
Right.
Yeah, we've learned a lot from a lot of mistakes, and I know me personally, I don't communicate that part of it. It's just, hey, this is what you should do, and this is the way it should be done, and stuff like that, without saying, hey, the reason I know this is because I haven't done it that way, and it hasn't gone the right way, So I don't know if that's the spirit of what that question was.
So let me ask you this, like in a parenting conversation, I've heard different takes on this, but is because I said so, because like when you tell your kids to do something, and oftentimes they'll say why, and because I said so, if we're not careful, it's a standard response. Is that an appropriate response for a parent? And because I said so is based on your experience, because you know more. Mm-hmm. Is that an appropriate response to your child?
I mean, I think in certain aspects, it is. And it all depends on the situation. We could go over 1,000 different situations, and I think maybe 1 out of 1,000 would be okay. But every time, if every answer is because I said so, then you become this authoritarian. You don't ever really teach the child. You're really raising a dependent adult who's just going to come to you from now on because it's always been because I said so. You're not. If you do that all the time, I don't think you're ever allowing them to process. You're never allowing them to think for themselves. It's just always because I said so. But now in certain times, it's, just because they need to, at the same time, follow authority because it's authority. So in certain aspects, I think it's okay, but if it's done all the time, it really can be crippling.
Right. So
is that the right answer?
I think so. It sounds right. This is a question that came from a life group, and that had to do with how do we break the cycle of unhealthy parenting? And that's a great question. Sherry and I were just talking about this yesterday, as a matter of fact. And basically that would be like if your parents, if they parented out of anger, or if they were always, saying harsh, critical words to you, or if they, if there was sexual abuse, or whatever the case, it was an unhealthy parenting paradigm, and that's all you know. How do you break that cycle and not pass it on to your kids? So I actually want to take this one. I think that if we're not really intentional, our parents, the way they parented, that paradigm will absolutely shape the way we parent. We will either parent like they parented, or we will parent exactly opposite of how they parented. So we will parent based on what they did, or we will try to do exactly opposite of what they did if we're not careful. Our parents' paradigm of parenting will absolutely shape the way we parent, unless we're really intentional about breaking that mold. So just because your parents did it or didn't do it doesn't necessarily mean it's right. And so I think what that means, how we break the cycle of unhealthy parenting, I think a great place to start is by exposing yourself to healthy parents. Especially if you're a young parent. Listen, the way your parents did it isn't necessarily right. Although they may have had a tremendous amount of wisdom. You know, so and the way they did it isn't necessarily wrong, okay? But I would just say for you, be thoughtful about how you parent and seek counsel from godly, wise, older parents who have already raised their kids or who are ahead of you in the parenting journey. The second thing I would say is read the Bible. Like, read through Proverbs. You would be blown away how much parenting advice there is in Proverbs. It is packed. I mean, a couple years ago, I've told you this, but I went through Proverbs and wrote down every verse that talked about parenting. It filled up pages of notes. If you would just study Proverbs, you would have a master's degree in parenting. It's amazing how much information is there. Good stuff. The third thing I would say is read books. There's so many good books. I would tell you a couple of books you should start with. One is called The 5 Love Languages of Children. Children express love in different ways. And if you, as a parent, I kept saying this throughout the series, your job is to have a PhD in your child, to be an expert in your child. And if you can do that, you stand a better chance of breaking any unhealthy cycles of parenting. But I would simply say this: if you're not intentional, you will either parent like your parents, or you will be reactionary in your parenting style and try to do everything they didn't do. Neither of which is a healthy extreme, especially if you had unhealthy parenting. So does that make sense? You guys have anything you want to throw in on that?
I mean, I would just add to apologize often. That's actually worked for me. I mean, if there's a habit that I've seen in myself that I don't necessarily like, I mean, I think apologizing to your child gives them the understanding, hey, that was wrong. So they don't pass that down to the next generation. I actually read that in a book years back, and it gave me the freedom to realize I didn't have to be perfect, but I was on the journey to keep getting better. So my children hear I'm sorry a lot because I get it wrong a lot, but I often try to tell them, you know, we want to change this and move it forward. So
this is a question for Chris and Shantae, and that is, how does a step parent help to navigate spiritual maturity in your home? If you're a step parent, how do you help to manage your stepchildren's spiritual well-being?
I mean, honestly, it all depends on kind of what stage that relationship's at, where the step parent and stepchild's relationship is at, because there are going to be varying forms of it. There's you know, ones where the step parent really is looked at as the parent for the child, and there's one where they are the step parent. You know, in the first role, of course, you're basically a parent. You want to be kind of the spiritual authority and leading, guiding, because that's the role that kid has kind of placed upon you. And in any role, I think, whether it's, you know, you're viewed as, you know, my mom's husband or my dad's wife, or, you know, you are my step parent, I look at you as an authority figure, or you're my dad, you know, because my dad may not be involved in my life, or however that relationship is. You always want to kind of take the role as as a spiritual influence, but there's going to be varying degrees because you don't want to overstep boundaries, you know, boundaries that the child has kind of set. Because in a step parent role, you realize I believe you really kind of got to let them set that tone. You don't necessarily want to, you know, kind of overstep your boundaries and be the one, well, you know, I'm going to be your father when they haven't kind of accepted that role yet. It all depends on you know, kind of where you are in that spectrum. Does that make sense?
A little bit. Can you give us more can you be more specific and just give us a little more detail, like how you manage that?
It all depends. Really, it's your relationship with the child, with the stepchild. I mean, that's going to determine where kind of where you fall with that, I guess. Because, you know, as a parent, as a biological parent, you know, I believe you have certain responsibilities to, you know, kind of help see them along on their spiritual journey. As a step parent, you kind of walk a finer line, you know, because if you are trying to push past that boundary and saying, well, you know, I'm going to be your, you know, I'm going to be your dad, and or I'm going to be your mom, and I'm going to, you know, kind of start building into you when they haven't given you that access, you're going to start pushing them away because you're overstepping your boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fighting for the heart. And I mean, it would be any adult in any situation. If you have the opportunity to influence a child, you're not just going to go in the child's life and start making demands or setting rules, but you will fight for that relationship. And I mean, that question was directed to us because that is the situation in our home. And as a biological parent of, 2 children, what I would say as a biological parent, and having Chris be our children's stepfather, he won a right in their lives. He won a right of respect for me because I don't question his discipline because he has fought not only for my heart, but he's fought for the heart of his children. And they identify him as their father. So our situation may be a little different, but I can say, looking back at the beginning of it, it really boils down to relationship. Fighting for that child's heart and then earning that respect from the parent, because when you know that someone has your child's best interest at heart, you're not going to question as much, what they're doing. But I would say to any adult that has the opportunity to influence a child spiritually, build that relationship, and it really opens the door to that influence.
Yeah, I guess a good way to put kind of what I was saying, I know it was long and drawn out, but would be to look for those spiritual opportunities instead of making them. That's good. Because if you try and make them, you're going to force it. And if you force it, it's not natural. It's going to come across as, hey, we're going to do, it becomes like that because I said so type deal. Whereas if you look for those opportunities, they're going to be there. And if you're looking for them when they come, you're going to be able to capitalize on them and take advantage of them. As opposed to just making them when you're kind of just forcing it. And it becomes unauthentic then, and I don't think it becomes very useful.
Sherry and I were talking the other day about this, and we're talking about the fact that this is a separate conversation, but our strengths can create weak points in our children. And so, for instance, you remember that conversation? You want to just kind of flesh that out a little bit? Our strengths create weaknesses potentially in our children if we're not careful.
Well, I was reading Boundaries for Children, and in there they had talked about this mother who was helping her teenage son put away his clothes and clean up his room as he was in there playing. And this expert was sitting downstairs and had decided for some reason to come upstairs and see what she was doing, and responded to her and said, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm just..." And then she stopped and realized, whoa, what am I doing? The son was a teenager, and she's doing what he should be doing and taking his responsibility. And his take was, the reason that you're doing that is because your strength is to help. And we don't even think about that. We think, I'm a helper, so I'm automatically it's natural for me to go do this for my child. Instead of saying, whoa, isn't it time for them? They're going to be an adult. What child am I raising? They're not going to know how to put their clothes away. They're not going to know how to clean their room because my strength is overtaking their responsibility. And me as myself see that. So I stepped back and went, whoa, because I like to have things done and in place. And rather than waiting on my kids to come home and do their chore, when I should be doing something else, I'll step up and do their chore for them because I like to get things done. It's one of my strengths. And I realized that I shouldn't do that. My strength was overtaking my children's responsibility, so I'm teaching them, well, maybe some days you have to do your chore when you get home, and maybe some days you don't. So they never really know. So if you might have a strength, and it could be your biggest problem to your child, in not helping them to grow up and be responsible and being a strong adult. And I think we kind of have to watch our strengths, so to speak, in raising children.
See why I love that girl so much? Yeah. Okay. So let's take one here. This question was, what's the deal with spanking? Do or don't? That's a great question. So do you guys have a thought on this? Because I have a couple of strong thoughts on this. I think this is one of those things where having a PhD in your child really helps. Because if we're not careful, we'll smack the crack for every offense, right? And a lot of times, if we're not careful, like spanking becomes our go-to default, and we do it out of anger. We put up with their disobedience. We put up with their disrespect until we blow up, and then we crush them, right? And so what we've realized is that for some of our kids, especially when they're younger, a spanking is appropriate. As the older they get, the more irritating a spanking becomes. And at that point, the Bible is very clear about that. Paul says to fathers, he says specifically to fathers, like, don't aggravate your children. But what I realize is for me there comes a certain point, and each child is different, right? But spanking at a certain point just becomes irritating to my child. We talked about this when we talked about discipline. Like, discipline should be, and what the word we used was significant. It should be significant enough that your child realizes, oh, I don't want to do that again. So for some children, a thump on the rump, and maybe 2 thumps on the rump will be appropriate enough to let them know, oh, I don't want to do that again because that caused me inconvenience. That hurt. I don't want to do that again. For other kids, I've seen parents, listen, they swat their kid, and it's not anything. It's just kind of like pushing someone. But that's not inconvenient for them. That's not, am I going to disobey or am I going to push? Well, I'm going to disobey. I'm going to do whatever I want and take the little push because it's no big deal. It's not significant spank. So if you're going to spank, it should be significant enough that your child makes the next time he starts thinking about whether or not he's going to do it, he should say, last time I did that, I got a smack on the crack and that hurt and I don't want to do it again. That's the point of discipline, is to teach them not to do that thing again. But it's not the answer for every time. It's really not. Again, I have children in our home. I'm telling you, man, I could jump off the roof and hit them with a flying elbow, and they would choose that rather than being stuck at the table for an hour. So for them, spanking doesn't work because I want the discipline to be significant enough to deter them from the wrong action that they're taking. So spanking absolutely is appropriate, and what we found is that, and listen, we've seen this, and the cool thing is, we've just seen this in multiple environments, not just with our kids, but with other kids as well. If they understand that you're clear and that you'll enforce your expectations, like, their behavior changes. We over the last several years, Sherry has had the opportunity to babysit a number of kids from a number of homes, and it's great. We don't spank their kids because it's not our right, but we do clarify expectations, and it's amazing the difference between how kids will act with us and how they'll act with their parents. Like, for instance, we don't ever chase it. We have never chased our kids. We don't chase them. I'm the adult, and I'm not going to chase you across the parking lot. It'll happen one time, and that's it. And we don't chase our kids, and we don't chase our babysitting kids because they understand when mom and dad say come, they come. But it's amazing. I watch parents who, they'll chase their 2-year-old across the parking lot. It's crazy to me. It doesn't have to be that way because at that point I know who the boss is. And the reason is because the parents haven't been clear in their expectations and the discipline hasn't been significant enough for their child to realize, oh, I don't want to, when mom and dad calls, I really do want to listen because the last time I didn't listen, it was significant. That make sense?
Consistency is a really big thing too. If you're not consistent, I feel like it's not fair to the child either. For them to think, oh, well, today I might not get disciplined and tomorrow I may. They just don't even know it's a guessing game. It's really hard for them, and it's frustrating for us. If we would just do the right thing, it's hard, but do the right thing all the time. Man, they get it. They understand, shoot, I just disobeyed. This is what's going to happen. It's really important.
Yeah, and also if you're not consistent, it kind of confuses them. But it's like, well, I got disciplined this time, but not this time. So then they're like, why'd you discipline me that time? It just confuses them. And then the whole premise behind discipline kind of loses its effect.
Absolutely. So I think the Bible is the Bible gives us, as parents, it gives us some guidelines. It says discipline your child. That's what we talked about last week. Discipline your child while there's hope. Because we don't discipline them. They may run away while they're 2 years old. Wait till and you don't correct that. Wait till they're 18. It's crazy. So let's do this. I'm just going to read this out loud. Please mention that we need to teach our children how to make decisions, even if it's what they want for lunch. PB&J or ham and cheese, then live with the consequences. They have to eat the sandwich they choose. So let's talk about teaching your children how to make decisions. Yeah, that's a big deal. You guys want to take that? Chris?
Okay. Well, I'll mention that we need to teach our kids to make decisions.
Feels good, Chris. Very well. You handled that well.
No, it's a great point because you do. I mean, it's mainly for
How do you do that?
a great example they gave. I mean, even the littlest things. You want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think as parents, that is difficult. Like Sherry was saying, sometimes that our strengths override and then become a weakness for our child. But I know Paul said often throughout this series that, we're raising adults. And I think when we keep that in mind, and what adult do you want to gift the world with? For example, one of my children decided they wanted to walk out of the house with shorts and short sleeves 2 years ago, and I said, absolutely not, get back in there and change. But I said, okay, do you realize that this is the decision you're going to make, and the consequence is yours? And I think giving them those little things, we also do it with money. They learn to handle their money. They get the choice of what they're going to buy. Now, we do encourage their saving and their giving, but then they're spending. And one of our children lost $62 the other week. That was a consequence of a choice that they made. My first response was I wanted to make it go away, and I wanted to go get the money and pretend like it didn't get lost, but it did. So I think that the great thing to remember is when they fail, there's a safety net, that's great. Because when they go out in the world and they haven't learned to make those decisions and realize there's consequences for their choice, they fail on a much larger scale, and there may not be someone there to pick it up. And also, the consequences will be a lot larger for them. And that's a lot of times what we tell our children. Right now, this is a small consequence. But, when you're an adult, this is going to be larger.
What I see is a lot of relationships aren't working like this. And the primary relationship in the home is the relationship between parent and child. And one parent gets left out. And typically the parent that gets left out gets frustrated and ends up looking at pornography and ends up doing other things that aren't healthy for their home, for their relationship. And all I want to say is, as a parent, your primary responsibility after God is to make sure that your spouse is well cared for. And I promise you, it's a great gift to your kids. Your kids will they'll appreciate that. And the growth. Some of the best kids that we've seen have come from homes where mom and dad cared well for one another, and their marriage continues to exist even after kids are gone. So I would just encourage you to remember that, like, the priority relationship in any home is not parent-child. It is absolutely parent and children, and it's critical. So, big deal. Okay, so let's do a couple more here. Last week we talked about the role of technology in the home, and I talked to 3 different school officials in various capacities, and they all 3 said that technology is an incredible tool, but it has also made parenting incredibly difficult. Because there's so much new stuff, like all the time. Like I just found a new one yesterday that my kids are familiar with. And so I'm trying to get on this now. It's like I have so many apps and app and things that rhyme with app on my phone trying to stay up with my kids, But it's important. So talk to us a little bit about the role that technology plays in your home, but even, as you guys have studied and listened, I mean, this is the world that you live in. Kids, talk to us a little bit about the potential implications of technology going crazy and how you manage it in your home.
Well, I mean, we once again it comes down to being having a PhD in your child first of all, and knowing them and knowing what they're interested in and having that relationship. I mean, along with that technology, there's also a lot of technology to help guard them from the negative things that are out there when it comes to that technology. There's a lot of filters, a lot of reports and stuff that can be used, parental controls, stuff like that can really gives you, as a parent, a little more power as opposed to just kind of letting your kids just run wild with it. And then next thing you know, you stumble on something, you're like, where did that come from? You really should, and we're kind of speaking from, a 9 and 10-year-old perspective. We have young children from a teenage perspective. We'll tell you in a couple of years because we haven't got there yet. But I know in our house, it is a lot of parental controls, say, for instance, when it comes to social media or stuff like that, you're not friends with somebody online if you're not friends with them in real life. That's kind of a hard rule we have. When they're playing video games and stuff, not necessarily doing the online stuff, because you just never know. You just never. We just made that a rule, just to kind of help protect from some of the stuff that's out there.
Right. We went to a conference, and the idea was your offline life should look like your online life. So if you wouldn't have the friends stay over and your parents be okay with it, then we're not doing that online. Our children aren't to the age where they would have social media profiles, but they do online gaming, and they have some friends that they play with, and we just keep the conversation open. The last thing I believe that we learned that we want to do is to teach them that technology or social media or anything is negative, because when they get old enough to see, hey, there was some positive, what they're going to think, well, my parent lied to me. So we keep that conversation open to, this is a great tool, but there are also some negatives to it. And we have our children come to us a lot and say, I need you to look at this, and is this okay? And I think it's creating that safe environment for them. But we do not allow them to have technology alone. They're in an open area, or let us know what they're doing, because sometimes our children will look up videos to go make something or do something. I think that's a great thing. But yeah, I think it's keeping the conversation open. Filters, we use like Google Safe Search and then other filters in our home. But also, if you do it online, then that's something you're saying, that's something that I would do offline, or a person that I would hang out with, or a statement that I would make as well.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the biggest ones that if you, I guess, really do kind of do what you're supposed to and kind of stick to your guns, you're definitely going to hear you're the worst parent ever. Especially just in thinking, especially if you're a parent of a teenager, when it comes to social media and stuff like that, I think if you do kind of set some guidelines and set some things to help them, then you probably are going to hear you're the worst parent ever. So just be prepared for that.
I think the key on this, for our experience thus far, has been to be engaged in every environment they're in. You go. And if we're not careful, it's really easy it's inconvenient, quite frankly, to be engaged in every environment that your kids are engaged in. It just is, especially as bigger your family, it's more and more inconvenient. But that's why we have a PhD in each child, right? To be engaged. And then, and what you see, some of the stuff is, quite frankly, even though you insist on filters, they are going to be shocked by some of the things that they see. And our job as a parent is to be available and proactive in starting that conversation, because there's a little thing called history, and you can actually look through the things your kids see, and I encourage you to do that. And from time to time, it's like, oh, and so immediately the conversation is really important. Without freaking out, let's say, hey, let's talk about what we saw there, and help them process. And obviously, we hope that doesn't happen a lot, but even if it's not on ours, it will be on friends. So let's do a couple more here. Somebody asked a really important question, and that is, how do you teach your kids to follow and trust Jesus? And how do you get them to realize that bad is not from God? In other words, how do you help your kids embrace your faith as a believer and understand that not everything bad happens in life is from God? So Dave, I'm going to throw that one to you.
Well, first off, I think you have to live that life, and not obnoxiously. I think you have to just quietly let them see, and not so much performing in front of them, but living out the Christ life is, once they see that in you. I think letting them see you read God's word, or letting them hear you sing songs to Him, or letting them see you help the neighbor and then say, here's why we do that. Or I think just living that daily before them is a really big deal. I think taking advantage of the opportunities when they say, and they will make some kind of remark that says something that leads into a conversation about God. And the door is open for you. They asked a question. That's kind of what we've always said. If somebody asks a question, be ready to give an answer. And I think your kids do that. And I think you step up and you go into that place and say, well, here's what Mom thinks and here's why. And I think just gently leading them into that place helps a lot. Another great thing that I found is if you spend time with them before they actually fall asleep, it's a really, really big deal. Somehow, I don't know if I've read this or heard this, but kids open up their heart to you before they go to bed. They tell you the inmost parts of their day. They tell you about their life. Even if you have older kids, just to sit down with them and just chit-chat. For some reason, before going to bed, they will give you their heart, so to speak. And that's when you get to see the beautiful person of who they are and lead them kind of in a direction that might ultimately lead to them asking Jesus into their life.
There's a great verse in Deuteronomy chapter 6 where Moses is talking to the people. He'd just given them all this information. He said, this is what God wants you to do. This is how he wants you to live. And they said, take these things and teach them to your children. Teach them while you're sitting at the table. Teach them while you're walking down the road. Teach them, when you're getting ready for bed. Teach them when you're getting up in the morning. And so basically that's what it says, just always being mindful and aware of opportunities. I know for us, like we actually take the information that you guys send home from Family 180, and we, on our dates, when I take the girls on dates, let's talk about it. Like, so now it's initiatives. Hey, ladies, talk to me about initiative. What does it mean? Give me an example. Let's talk about, we talk about it and stuff. So we're actually using the resources that you guys send us to talk about God and teach them how to live, the way He wants us to live. So thank you. Thank you.
Ultimately, I think when they ask questions, you just keep gradually pointing them in that direction. And one day they'll say to you, I just had that experience half a year ago at bedtime, saying, well, how does Jesus come into my heart? And I'm like, oh my gosh, yay. And, I just walked her, she's like, is that easy? I'm like, yeah, you just ask Jesus into your heart. Let's do it right now. You want to? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, this is great thing. Jesus is going to live inside of you. He's going to help you. And as a parent, that's like one of the biggest, to me, it was like, she made that decision on her own, and you just move in when they ask questions. It's a big deal.
Yeah, and I think another important thing with that too is making sure you do have that circle of influence, other people that will kind of say the same things you will and will reinforce things that you will, or that you will say. That's kind of our vision for Family 180 is, whether it's Shantae or I or one of our volunteers, to kind of be that circle of influence for you. We realize and we know that we want you to be the spiritual authorities in your child's life, not us. We kind of want to be just like the cool uncle that they go to every once in a while, and you say the same exact thing. I know parents, you understand this. You could tell your child something 15 times, but if Uncle John says it, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. You're like, well, I've said that like 15 times. We kind of want to be that cool uncle that's going to say the same exact thing you'll say, but for some reason they'll listen to us, and we want to lead them back to you. And it really is. We're never designed to do this alone. We're never designed to raise spiritual kids on our own. We're designed to do it in community with other people that will reinforce what we're doing. So it really is seeking out and being intentional about finding those influential people that will help you raise your child.
So let's do one more question, and then we're going to probably wrap up here. How do parents know if they're spending the right amount of time with their children, younger or older? That's a really good question. I think your kids will let you know, quite frankly, but the honest answer is most of us probably aren't. Like, you've never played with your kids so much, you're like, all right, I'm done playing. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, for the most part, okay, Dad, we've played enough. Yeah. We don't hear that a lot, right? So you could probably always spend more. And it's interesting, we're entering a phase now where I go and eat lunch with my kids on Mondays. So it's a different kid every Monday, right? And I've got a couple in middle school now, and they're at a point now where it's not cool. When they're in elementary school, it's like, yeah, that's my dad! And they're like, fired up, the dad's here, and yeah! And they get middle school, and so we're navigating that, and quite frankly, it hurts my feelings. It hurts my heart a little bit, you know what I'm saying? It's just, but you guys have been, a lot of you have been through it, where like, your kids get older and you're less cool. When I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, we still look pretty cool. But they don't think so, And so, it's just navigating that. And I think they'll let you know. That's what I'm hearing now. Like somebody, one of my is like, you don't have to come eat lunch with me. So I said, well, how about this? How about if I bring you lunch and then I'll be out? I'll bring you a Burger King or something and just drop it off in your class, give you high fives. Like, that'll work. So I think the kids will let you know. And this is what I've heard from other parents along the way is that your kids will let you know and respect that. So that's a big deal. So Anything else, guys? So let's do this. As a church, like, we really value families and kids, and we want desperately to partner with parents, and that's what Family 180 is about. These Chris and Shantae are, in my opinion, just the top shelf family pastors. They really do pastor our kids. I mean, I've seen moments where my kids have been navigating, some difficult points in their life, and Chris or Shantae has showed up. I know Shantae has showed up and taken a couple of my different kids out to lunch and just poured into them as a pastor. And you guys are just, in my opinion, you're the best. I love how you care for our kids. I know the stuff you do behind the scenes and the way you pray for and carry the burden for our children. This is your church right next door, and we're really, really grateful for the investment you make in our kids. And I think it's an incredible gift to our church and to our kids to have you guys on the team. And I just want to publicly say I honor you. I couldn't be happier with my children's pastors. I tell you this all the time. I'm a daddy before I'm a pastor, and I'm interested in my children's spiritual well-being. And to know that you guys are their spiritual overseers here in this environment, and that you're partnering with Sherry and I is a real gift. And so just want to say I appreciate you tremendously. So absolutely. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to pray, and we're going to go because we want to beat the Baptists to Moe's. But listen, we want to beat the Presbyterians to Moe's too, right? And the Independent, we want to beat Elevation to Moe's too. So we're going to pray, and we're going to go. Somebody told me once, they said, you always say we're going to beat the Baptists to Moe's. I'm like, well, I want to beat everybody to Moe's. So we're going to pray. Chris and Shantae are going to go to the back. They have a book they want to give you guys. So if you have kids, please get one of these books. It's an incredible resource. If you haven't yet and you want to see me after church, we'll sign you up for Smart Money, Smart Kids. And also, in the very back, in the back of this room off the corner here as you're going out, we have a photo booth. And if you want to, you can go and stand with your family in there, and we're going to take a picture of it, and we're going to send it to you with this Sirius logo. If you want to throw it back up on the screen, the Sirius logo. It'll be the hashtag worst parent ever will be at the bottom of this photo. We'll email it to you today. So if you're here, this will be at the bottom of the picture. You can get a picture of your family with your kids, and this logo will be in the bottom of the picture. It'll be sent to your email today. So they'll be in the back there. Take your kids, get a picture taken with them, and they'll email it to you. All right? So let's pray. Chris and Shantae, if you want to get our books ready, that'd be awesome. Father, we want to say a big thank you for people who've gone before us and parented and done it well. We want to give honor, Lord, to those who are in this room today who have raised kids and have done it well. We tip our hats to them, and we say thank you for their example. Thank you, Lord, for bringing them to our church so that we can learn from them. And Lord, we certainly want to say thank you for your word that gives us so much good information about how to parent well in a world, Lord, that doesn't always think the way that we think. And they may have a different approach to parenting, Lord. But I thank you for the information that you give us. Thank you for your Spirit who lives inside of us, who encourages us and affirms us and corrects us and guides us as we listen to you, Lord. It gives us instruction on how to parent well. Father, I pray that as we manage this journey of parenting and raising our children well, Lord, I pray that you'll give us wisdom. Encourage us, bring people alongside us, Lord, who will affirm us, and we'll be really, really grateful for that, and we'll gift the world with adults who understand how to live in this world as followers of Jesus and people who add value to the lives of others. Thank you for our church, for this opportunity to be in this room today. In Jesus' name, amen.